Okay, we good? All right, I'm gonna bring this meeting to order. Don Berube, 135 River Road.
Kim McDaniel, Select Board Rep.
Carrie Mackinnon, Remote Operator and Community Development Director.
Jess Duke, 50 Brown Hill Road.
Ben Davis, 9 Wheeler Road.
Michael Lawton, 3 Asa Drive.
Sandy Crystal, 1 Shoreview Drive.
Ginger Iverson, recording secretary.
All right. So we get started right off with the conceptual consultation with Continental Paving, Inc. Plan for continued excavation of gravel pit located at 1601 Route 3A in the South Bowl Mixed Use District.
Good evening,
Good evening.
and thank you for allowing us to come and make a presentation today. My name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney at Gottesman and Hollis, 39 East Pearl Street in Nashua. And I'm here representing Continental Paving, Inc. Continental Paving, as you probably all know, is the owner of gravel excavation off of Route 3A. It's map 45 Block 2, Lot 147. And is around a conglomerate of 278 acres of land that they own. Just as some brief history, Continental Paving purchased it in July of 2009 from Palazzi Corp., but before then, they had been the operator and applicant for permits on that site. Palazzi owned it from 1968 when they bought it from a fellow named Rogers, and he had actually worked that site before. Palazzi operated it, and according to the records we were able to obtain from Palazzi, they received the first permit, according to their records, from the town in October of 1976, and that was a special exception permit. After 1976, at that time, it was an annual permit by special exception, and they came in annually every year. Then there was a period of time around, it looks a period around 2006, when it was shifted to a 3-year, and then it became a 5-year permit. But each time the Continental Paving came before the Zoning Board of Adjustment and introduced what they were going to do for the year, showed them the plan, essentially got the approval. Continuation of the special exception was how it was always written in the records. As you know, New Hampshire has a law on gravel excavation, RSA 155E, and under 155E, they have certain permit requirements, and the permit requirement is you go to the local regulator, and the local regulator in most towns was the planning board, but in your town it was the zoning board of adjustment. Now, you have changed your ordinance recently to say that, like most towns, Bow now has the planning board be the regulator. But the other change is, under your zoning ordinance, not only a gravel excavation operation, whether it's non-conforming or not non-conforming, seems to fall under the category of having to come before the board to get a conditional use permit and also to present a site plan, which are significantly different requirements than what my client had to do every 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years. So in researching it, since I started with a permit in '76 and had record of them applying to the town in '76, 155E seems to exempt you specifically under the statute. The statute 155E requires a permit, and the permit is defined as whatever the local regulator gives you. But 155E2 says if it existed as of August 24th, 1979, and had hauled commercially useful material during a 2-year period prior, it may continue to be exempt from filing a permit. So there's sort of a conflict in that you're exempt from filing a permit, except they kept coming to the board. And the only explanation I have is from my client, which is, yeah, we came annually. In fact, there's minutes of one of the meetings in 2006 where Palazzi said, now I'm just reminding you, I'm still contesting that I'm exempt, but I'm here as a good citizen. And I think that's how it's proceeded. I can't speak to it because I wasn't here, but that's essentially the history that, as I understand it. And my client first came to me and said, well, I've changed the rules here, what do we do? And I, after doing my examination, could not find anything specific other than what I've recited in 76 and every year after there was a permit obtained. Now, the statute also says that in 1991, you had to file a report with the town in order to be considered exempt. I don't have a copy of that report, but I do have copies of every year them filing with the Zoning Board of Adjustment exactly what the report calls for. So my tendency is to say that they've been in full compliance and they're fully exempt and they don't really need to come before the town to get a permit. Having said that, I thought it'd be prudent to come in and present our case so we're not just smashing heads against each other, and to say, we don't mind coming in and giving you an update as we always did. And maybe we should find out, since it's new to you as a planning board, what it is you would expect us to present. And then we can make a decision how hard we're gonna push against coming, and you can decide whether or not you think we're exempt. I spoke to Ginger, would have to submit an argument and a case, and would do so, and that would be up to your town administrator to decide, are we exempt, are we grandfathered, et cetera. But I thought if we came here, maybe we'd have a dialogue. We could explain what we're doing. You can explain to us what it is you expect to see in a conditional use permitted application, and whether you think there are any issues involved that you might see at this time. So that's my presentation. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce, and I have with me Hayner Swanson, who's been doing plans since 2006. And they have the current plan and the layout. And for those of you who've never seen this, because the planning board hasn't really had a review, I thought it'd be good for him to give a whole description. Also have with me Mark Charbonneau, who, according to the records, has been coming here since 2006 as well, and he's the president of Continental Paving Inc. So he can answer any questions and describe what he intends to do.
I didn't quite catch his name when you said it.
This is Jim Petropoulos
Okay.
of Hayner Swanson Inc., but you go by, what's the name of the?
IMAC, yeah.
IMAC.
It's an Irish name.
So with that, if I might, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. Yeah, for the record, Jim Petropoulos. I'm a professional engineer with Hayner Swanson, and have been fortunate to represent Continental for many years, but here on this particular property since '06. And I think what I could add to the discussion tonight is just to give you a sense of where things are at and what maps look like and really what we're talking about. This is a 192-acre property in Bow at the Hooksett Town line, okay, which borders the property to the south. 192 acres. The site is bordered to the west by Route 3A, River Road to the north, railroad tracks, and of course the river to the east. And then across the town line is, in Hooksett, is land owned by Continental as well. Access to this site is through a private drive onto Route 3A, right near Weaver Brothers. Is it still Weaver Brothers? Yeah, right near Weaver's Brothers business right there on Route 3A. What we prepared in advance of, at Morgan's request, in advance of coming to see you, is just a series of drawings, and these series of drawings have been consistent with what we've been doing over the years for the zoning board, where I actually have this kind of rotated a little bit. Here's 3A, here's the river, here's the river. Here's the 192 acres. And what this plan is kind of what's going on today, where you have, I'm gonna say a little less than half the property is involved in earth removal. A number of areas are completed. They're down to a grade in which they won't continue to go at greater depths. And that really the next piece is identified here in the southwest quadrant of this excavation. And so the second plan is just that. It kind of tells the story of, the stockpile area, what's been completed. It shows our access. And here is really the next area of focus. And we've identified it in 4 phases, and each phase is approximately 4 acres in size. So you're looking at about 16 acres. And it's estimated that to take anywhere from 3 to 4 years to excavate the material out of that particular area to a grade that's consistent. Of course, the ultimate goal here is to end up with a piece of property that has some rhyme and reason to it, that's well connected with regards to grade. So this would be the next area of focus. And then lastly, consistent with 155E, the seek for reclamation, there really isn't a whole lot to report here, other than, when this is done, you can see some of the contouring. These are some 10-foot contour intervals. So there will be a slope left behind the Weaver property, and then up to the line, you'll see there's also will be a cut slope there in a relatively flattish area once complete. Of course, this whole area gets reclaimed with loam and seed when it's complete, and then they would move on to the next phase. So it's a fairly simple plan. There's not a whole lot of engineering to it, but we wanted to just kind of tell the story of how does this look and where are you headed. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And pretty much Jim could explain better, but from my understanding, what was delivered at each meeting of the zoning board, either 1, 3, or 5 years, was the question, how much did you excavate? How much do you have open? Is the bond in place? Will you renew the bond? And what's your remediation? And those are the kind of things that were reported on a regular basis. And as I say, the conditional use permit requirements are a bit different. There are 6 criteria, and then you have another 6 that the board has to make findings on, and then you have a site plan, and you go through the site plan process of evaluation. One of the thoughts is whether or not you have ever considered waiving the site plan regulations to the extent that a plan like this would work. That's not going to comply with your site plan regulations. And whether or not, what you're looking for in a conditional use permit application. So that's kind of where we are. Happy to answer any questions.
Just so I'm clear on the argument. So you're saying obviously the planning board is now the new sort of overseer of this. Your claim is that because it was started in '76, it is grandfathered in, it doesn't need any permitting. But if we are going to press that you need permitting, you want guidance on what that will look like. Is that a fair assessment?
That is correct. Yep.
And this is just your plan here is to reiterate, it sounds like it's just a continuation of what you've been doing for 45 odd years.
Exactly.
Yeah, as best I can determine from the early minutes, it was sort of the request of the zoning board. Come in and show us where you are, show us where you're going, and show us how you're doing your reclamation. And then it moved to a bonding stage when bonds became popular. But it's really just a sort of a show us what's going on. So as you all may or may not know, since you're new to the regulator business, the pits that don't have the greatest of history in the world of management and making sure there's adequate controls in place. So oftentimes, new pits have a series of conditions of approval on them, but old pits are just excavation sites. And I think that was always the concern of the zoning board, and fortunately, my client is a pretty good operator, so we never had any issue.
I can say a couple things.
Sure.
So I guess my advice or recommendation to the applicant was pick a path, either produce evidence that you would qualify as being grandfathered or prepare the CUP and site plan applications, and I kind of left it up to them as which path made sense for them. Couple other things I'll say is that they did voluntarily increase the bond amount that we had here on file. Did you prepare an estimate along with your reclamation plan that would support the amount of the bond?
We did not for this, but
Okay.
it's easily determinable, sure. And it's generally, I think in the past, our testimony has been, in the last 3 to 5 years, we've taken about 1 million yards out. It's generally in that range.
I think it would be helpful to have, it's great that they increased the bond amount, but I think it would be helpful to have the engineer's estimate to support that number.
Which would just be basically if you stop that to reclaimed, loam and seeded.
Exactly.
What you're looking at.
I'd like to add something to that, just so everybody knows, we've also never taken any loom off this site for that reason. So all the loom, there's this huge pile in the middle, but that's what that was for. And a lot of the history too with these pits is everybody was to get rid of the loom, selling the loom, and then there was nothing to reclaim the property. And that's never hidden for, and that's been in the minutes that have been coming over the years too, to explain that we have all the topsoil to cover it. And we reclaimed quite a few areas. If you look along 3A, right along 3A, you know, there's a big area here that's been all reclaimed. We try to always reclaim and keep growth going. And so we've kind of ended up in this area quite a bit because that's where the better material is. So.
Town council need to weigh in on whether it's grandfathered in or not. That seems to be the first step.
It's possible, so to date, they haven't, the applicant hasn't presented a case saying, we believe we're grandfathered.
Right.
If they chose to do that, we probably would have town council weigh in on that.
And we just thought, I think between our discussion, we concluded maybe it's best to come and see what the board's position on, if we allowed you jurisdiction, if we agreed to jurisdiction, where do we go from here? Because it's too new for us and too new for you. In other words, we have a very large acre. Once we come in, are we gonna get permitted just for 3 acres or 4 acres at a clip, or would we get permitted for the entire, what did you say it was, Jim, on the both side, 190 acres?
Oh,
192.
Total, yeah, 192.
Yeah.
But you got 16 left to excavate on.
That's the next phase. No, it's
Yeah,
not,
that's
that's
just
not
the
what's
next
left,
phase.
that's just the
Right.
next piece, right?
So would we have to come in with a phasing plan if we wanted to get permit for everything? And then how often do we come back, that kind of thing? I don't really know how you would do that, and that would sort of weigh on our decision process.
one question I have, Carrie, is, our approval of this would be site-specific, so if the, operation was ever sold, that permit would still be available to the new operator.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess a couple other things I'll mention is looking back through the history a little bit, I can see that they have regularly come to the boards and renewed their permits, more so than some of the other pits I've seen. Some of them have some gaping holes in their history of permitting. This one seems to be very consistent, to now. And then when you talked about the phasing, I think in previous approvals, sometimes we've seen approvals where there's a cap on how many acres can be open at any given time, so we don't, so maybe.
Is there some
in a-
state regulation on that also?
That was a town,
That's
that's
a
what
town.
we, also, we debated that a fair amount, cause we're chasing select material to make asphalt, it's a little different than just getting rid of it. So we always went back and forth on that, we tried to stay in compliance, but we were very close and we were out sometimes too. So, but that, everybody kind of agreed to it at the time on the board, cause they would come visit the pit and saw how it was being operated, and it wasn't one of your problem childs.
And then one more question is, what's the status, do you require to do AOT permitting for this site? Is it grandfathered? What is the status of that?
Yeah, it's our testimony, we're grandfathered through that process, and we have had discussions with DES over the years.
Okay, so you don't do any AOT permitting? Our timeline as it stands currently is that the planning board approvals can be for up to 3 years. There had been some discussion about possibly extending that to 5 years because the pits that do have to do AOT permitting have to do renewals every 5 years and to align those so they're not offset. So I think we'll be talking about that for town meeting potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I know, Continental's always been a good steward to the town. What they're doing here. It is definitely good to know what's going on, and how, I mean, my biggest question is, how long is it gonna be excavated, a pit until it can actually get some development someday? That's gonna be the bright side for the town, so it's just kinda nice to hear those updates. I understand that it's a lot of years away, but
How many years away?
yeah, that's the big question.
Well, that's the challenge though, in reality, like I've said, I've been on the Bow committee, is that the problem is to develop this piece of property, we're involved in a lot of projects, and we built a lot of projects, and the challenge is dealing with the traffic. And I know everybody has a dream there, but the problem is, we have a nightmare on Route 3A. And that's the challenge, so to bring something big in there, at the end of the day, we're developers, we don't wanna destroy the land, okay? Our original goal, like our conceptual originally, we were gonna try to buy Ploods and tie that in, but they've obviously ruined that piece of land with all the crap they're dumping on it, so we have no desire to be part of it anymore. And it's so upside down, it doesn't really work. But we originally were looking to put like a master plan with a road going through the whole thing, I mean, so we're developers, so at the end of the day, we don't wanna ruin the land, we wanna have it to develop down the road. But that being said, I'll also tell you the reality of getting highways and ramps, you know, exit 4A in Londonderry took 35 years, and it's just not even done yet, but it's just opening, okay? And that project, we've been involved in at exit 4A and built it, and then on the other side, Tuscan Village is getting built out because the highway's all built around it. So that's what happens on the real side of it. So everybody has a dream, but unfortunately, it's 20 years away if we're lucky to see that kind of fix, because I mean, we have too many failed intersections. We gotta get on the highway. I mean, that's the problem to do anything major, you know what I mean? And the warehouse thing is over. I mean, at the Hooks and Toll Booth, that warehouse isn't getting finished. You know what I mean? It's, you know, this, maybe a warehouse would have been good, but even that, you know, that's some night traffic, so it's not probably so bad, but there's, you know,
highway.
yeah, it's over. There's 5 million square feet sitting there empty right now, so. But again, it's back to traffic and roads and infrastructure, which we don't have, and the problem is the value to fix that infrastructure, you're talking 40 or 50 million dollars. It kills any piece of property for a project. It has to become a community, state, and federal thing. You know, the exit 4A is gonna be up over 70 million. This is probably gonna be at 100 million by the time it happens to 150 in reality.
130.
What?
It's 130.
Oh, 130, okay, yeah. So he's been working on some of the projects, so, you know, that's 35 years ago that got started. You know, that's the reality of all these.
So the answer is at least 30 years.
I don't think there's 30 years left of material there, probably 20, 25, but also because it's a very good resource, we keep trying to use less and less. If you look at our quantities, we take less and less out every year because we're trying to stretch it because it's unreplaceable. But also, if something happened and there was opportunity, we would probably speed that up. But at the end of the day, we look at it as an asset for development, not destroy the land just to get the dirt.
My instinct is that it doesn't sound like the process was broken before. They're changing who oversees it. It sounds to me, and I would wanna check, that this has been a very good tenant in the town. I don't think we should be, and this is just my view, imposing more onerous regulation just because it comes under our purview. If there was something broken with the previous process, I think this would be the time to say, look, this hasn't been working. We're gonna start being a little more attentive to this. But I would wanna perhaps check this, but it sounds from all accounts that like this has been working. You know, it's not like they've been doing nothing. They've been coming and updating someone about, you know, for very regularly. As long as that continued, I just don't think we need to put costs on you and more red tape in the way.
Well, the big issue, as I said, is in a site plan review. I've not been before Bo, but the requirements are generally, you know, we would have to do a traffic study, we have to demonstrate safety, we have to do a little more engineering work, and yeah, so if it's within range of this board's conception, we would probably come in with a plan like that and ask for a waiver of all other requirements. And if that sounds like a direction, I think that makes sense to us. It'd be a 3 to 5 year window. If we get a CUP, then you know you got regulations in place. We're comfortable with that going forward. And we know that we'll be back in a 5-year period.
It protects the town. And you brought up a good point, Morgan. I was gonna bring it up that we've done a number of these over the years, kind of 155E related projects. And there isn't a whole lot more content.
I was gonna say, what else can we ask for?
It's pretty straightforward. So where most towns' regs are lighting, landscaping, traffic, and all the bells and whistles on a bank site plan or a condominium project, we're not gonna have that. So I think the notion of putting forward a CUP, which gives you the look We'll have to talk about term. If it's 3, it's 3. We'd obviously like 5. But then, if we head this way, we'd probably want to church up the plans as best we can, work with Karen, but ask for a waiver of full site plan approval.
I don't get to vote, but what I will say is that in the past, the way this board typically works is that they are very reasonable about waiving things that don't make sense for a particular plan. They're obviously not gonna ask for lighting and landscape and traffic on a plan that doesn't have any of those things. So I would suggest that you submit a site plan application with a lot of waivers, so that you get an approved site plan, but it has a lot of waivers of the thing. It's basically the same, gonna be the same plan. We're gonna call it a site plan and a CUP. And obviously with the CUP, we'll see a narrative that explains how you meet the CUP criteria.
Right.
And then the other thing that I think is missing, like we already talked about, was the restoration estimate.
Right.
For me, I
So
think
you
that
might
helps.
see from us the request for CUP, an application for site plan, and it might say reserving all our rights to claim vested, just in case we get into a tussle over something. I don't foresee that, not knowing my,
But just to protect yourself.
knowing my
yes, you
client,
would.
yeah. But I just didn't want you to be shocked, oh, well, he's in here, but he's hedging his bets, yep.
Is the 3-year a site plan regulation?
It's specifically in our,
See,
it's in the excavation section.
It got bumped to 5, I believe. I don't think it went back to 3. Originally it was 3 and then it got bumped to 5 in 2000
Town's excavation
Just
regs?
before COVID, it went to, the last time I came was 5 years. Got bumped to 5 years.
Unfortunately, I
It
don't
was
know what it
probably
is.
2017. I can't remember what it was.
It says.
No.
What?
Looking at all those.
Right here. Alright, so with the exception of approvals for excavation, for which the planning board may specify a date upon which expiration expires, not to exceed 2 years, actually.
with the exception of, it says the excavation shall, what section are you reading?
Sorry, it's 14.05B.
Yeah, but she's a planner, but we used to be in the ZBA though, that's what I was saying. The ZBA, I believe it switched to 5 years. We did 2 5-year times.
My question is that a waivable item by the board?
It's in the zoning,
It's under the
so
zoning
I
piece?
would
Yeah,
say-
it's under the zoning. And
I
it,
do-
and it's a 2-year period.
Yeah, so I think the board is considering bringing that up for a change at March town meeting.
Yes, we're trying to get things to match the state.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, especially if projects are doing AOT, it just doesn't make sense to come here every 2 years and AOT every 5, and then then they're always updating plans.
So you could condition that if it changes, then the 2 go to 5. Come on,
Probably
Counselor.
not, but-
Because we'll likely be through the process before March town meeting.
Happy to answer any questions, but I think you've answered our questions.
The other thing I'll bring up is that, I don't know if you were all aware, but all the excavation operations submit an annual intent to excavate and a report of material excavated. So if anyone's interested in how much material is being excavated, we get those reports annually. It's not a plan, it doesn't show where it came from, it's more just numbers of how much material is coming out.
a lot of boat keeps leaving. We get good material.
One truck at a time.
The other thing I'd like to just throw out to everybody too, Weaver Brothers Construction, there's a peak there. We have an agreement with them to take that out. So we're gonna make those grades kind of all match, you know what I mean? So it won't be this 100-foot face from their yard to our yard, this island.
Yeah.
So we have an agreement with them to take all that out.
So at some point, like right now, I know that hill got
We
cleared,
got cleared, right, but it's gonna come out.
if that's gonna come out. So
Is
you're
that
gonna have,
immediate
when you drive by, you're gonna see.
Yeah, we're headed that way, so it's within the 5 years this being expired, that's
Is
gonna
it
be.
part of the development of Weaver Brothers, or?
No, it's just, it's back, basically, they've been there forever, and it's just more, they've been on, it's really at our property line. So. It's-
Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And,
Yep.
yeah,
We'll be back to you.
that, public hearing time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to public hearings, proposed amendments to site plan and subdivision regulations. I think Gary's gonna start this.
So at our last meeting, we talked about setting up a small working group to try to work through these regulation amendments. So Kip, Sandy and I met, and what our approach was to separate out the low-hanging fruit of the things that are easy. We could just say, yes, this needs to be changed. And then we can spend more time on the stuff that needs more thinking and research and planning. So tonight, we have presented a list of largely housekeeping items. And so you will hold a public hearing and hear if there's any public comments on them. I'm happy to go through them individually if you want, or if the public has questions about them individually, or
Maybe,
if you're comfortable with them, we don't necessarily have to.
all I'd say is that we only went with the most housekeeping of stuff. Anything that was remotely controversial, we would not deal with in that meeting. I would suggest we have over the public hearing, if any of the board have specific questions, we go that way.
Yeah, or if the public has specific questions, we're happy to discuss them.
Okay. Since it looks like we got a couple gentlemen here who wanna be the public tonight,
Mike, do you wanna weigh in?
so I will open it to the public to see what type of concerns or comments or questions either you gentlemen have on.
I have none.
Okay.
Housekeeping changes.
Tom?
Tom?
I have none.
Okay.
Wow.
You
But I do
sure?
appreciate being called a gentleman for the first time. Nothing nicely done.
All right, well, with that, I will close the public hearing.
Anyone on the board have any questions or any of them you wanna talk about? I don't wanna feel like we're rushing through these, but I will say they are pretty straightforward. I guess,
I'm trying to think of any that, like, if I hadn't been in that meeting, I'd wanna know about.
so one of them is the lapse of approval. So currently if a
Can you give the number?
number 7 on the subdivision regulation ones. I think there's gonna be a matching one in the site plan too. Currently, if after you approve a site plan or a subdivision, the applicant has 90 days to meet all the conditions before it lapses and they have to come back here and ask for an extension. So this is a proposal to extend that to 180 days so that they don't have to keep coming to us for extensions on state permitting, which
90 days
takes
goes
more
by
than 90
real
days.
fast.
So that's a policy change. I know we've talked about that here previously, so I think you are all comfortable for that.
I like the very controversial site plan number 14, calling Carrie by her correct title.
Yep.
It says change public notice to 10 days, what was it
Oh,
before?
that's a good one to bring up. 14.
Oh, okay.
So 10 days is the law. We
So
gave
is it 10 business days or is it 10 calendar days?
10 calendar days. It does not count the day of the hearing or the day it's posted, so it's really 11 or depending on how you count, but and in reality, we'll probably still post it 2 weeks in advance. It kind of just gives us a buffer, so we're if we're
If you're a
some-
day late, you're good. You're-
yeah, we'll probably still aim for the 2-week line. And then the other change is that currently Ginger sends a copy of a plan with the abutter notices. That's not required by law. It's extra. It's a lot of paper, a lot of folding. So we propose to cut that out. And if
And the letter would just have a link where they can go find the.
potentially, we
address.
QR codes.
didn't require that in the regulations. If we can, we will. But it'll say, I mean, it'll be available in the office if you're interested. We've found that even when we do send it, a lot of people don't know how to read the plan without some orientation.
Yeah.
Sometimes people come in like, where's my house? I don't even know, or like, it's a lot line adjustment and they're like, how many Walmarts are they building? So I think if people have questions, it's best if they call or come in and we
Yeah.
can help guide them
So they'll
through it
still get a
anyway.
letter, they just
They'll
won't
still
get
get
the.
a letter,
Oh, okay.
and then and then the people who are interested will reach out and we will give them personal attention.
Anything else?
It's pretty straightforward.
I will make a motion to amend the subdivision regulations as described in numbers 1 through 11.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, sorry, I just, sorry.
Nobody's opposed.
Nobody's opposed.
All right.
Okay, I've got
I
it.
was confused.
I'll
Those
make a
are two
motion
different
to
lists.
amend the site plan regulations as outlined in numbers 1 through 17.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah. And none of these have to go to town vote?
Correct.
No, these are,
Simple. Just a public hearing.
How do you know the difference?
So
What?
these are the site plan regulations and the subdivision regulations. These are the board's regulations. The stuff in the zoning ordinance is what goes to town meeting. Good question.
I didn't realize there were two separate things, that's why I was hesitating.
So we're gonna meet actually tomorrow and keep going on the tougher ones.
Good.
So
May I ask a
Now that the low
question?
fruit's gone.
Yeah, I know.
Have a note
So
for you.
usually when you do this, you put how many ayes and how many nays? Who's
It would have
voting?
been 5, which I didn't put Ben, and I usually have to keep it as
Wait,
odd, so.
1, 2, 3, 4, oh, so it'll be 5, okay. Thank you.
you want to do the business?
yeah, so I have a couple of little old business things and then we have Mike Tardif from the Regional Planning Commission here for the master plan kickoff.
Ah,
So whatever order you wanna do it.
yeah, let's get to our
So
new
we-
business.
Yeah, we do have a couple items of old business, but we can do that after.
My turn.
Your turn.
Good evening. So, time flies.
Yeah,
And the last master plan was completed in 2017. Previous one was '04. So here to talk about the update of the master plan. The, and kind of we had talked about phasing it this time and, the first phase to get going. And Gary and I had talked about kind of the first steps for the master plan. There's many ways to update the master plan. These days, it's more of an evergreen, you do a couple of chapters at a time and then, cobble it together and we're done. The opening phase seems to, work best with visioning sessions, survey, get the word out, get as much feedback as you can. Last time we had about 250 responses to the survey. I think we can do better. And we've, experimented with different ways to get the word out. The flashing highway signs work great. For whatever reason, people see that, but I think a goal of 400 responses this year to the survey is a good one. And a room full with a visioning session and then going out to some other folks to build the base for your work updating the master plan. And that's our recommendations. This first phase, I think, could also include updating your transportation chapter. We have some funding from DOT that we can cobble together with your funding.
Can you back up and give what is a master plan quick, we have some new people.
Jump right into the master plan.
Can you just, I'm not sure if
Sure.
everyone has the context.
So the master plan is basically a policy document for the planning board to help you with your work. So it helps with the regulations update, zoning changes that you wanna make, thinking about 30 years from now and redevelopment of excavation areas.
I know, when he was talking, I was like,
I was
oh,
like,
master
that's
plan, let's get him
perfect,
to
yeah.
the meeting.
I love talking 30 years down, maybe 25. Improvements to 89 exits and, all of that work that you've done. Bow Mills, the support for those longer term projects. It's the planning board's document, but it also, you seek to get as much input from Economic Development, Conservation Commission, all those other boards to build that document that you can use to help you with your work. But you also want it to help the Economic Development Committee, you want it to help the Conservation Commission in the work that they do. Help Carrie when she's doing a grant application, you know, build the base for perhaps sometimes better relationships with DOT. Because you've done, you know, you've kind of added to that work, thinking about what you want to see in the next 15, 20 years, and those access points to 3A and 89. So, but it's an advisory document. You need the master plan in place to support your zoning. That's really the key. Our work, the Regional Planning Commission, is to make sure that it's your voice. And, you know, basically, you know, working through that process and not running you into the ground. You know, it doesn't have to take 3 years. It doesn't have to take meeting every other week for 3 years. But I think there's some work to be done. It is a lift. Oftentimes we'll have a subcommittee. So a subcommittee of this group and get some help, because there's people that want to help. You want to get some help from other committees and other boards to get that voice, but ultimately it's the planning board's document to help you with you know, those conversations for future zoning changes, all those things that you do. How's that for a little step back?
That's good.
It can be whatever process you want to, and the process is important, I think, as the product. And that getting as many voices, because you learn a lot of things from folks. The survey, having some open-ended questions in the survey, so give people an opportunity to really give it to you, and that's very interesting. And doing the analysis for that is pretty interesting, but it's also, you know, I think a pretty good process. So our job is to help you through the process. And I think tonight we're just hoping to kind of organize, get going, think about when we talked about kind of what could be part of this first phase. It's those visioning sessions, the survey, a transportation chapter to kind of work through what you want and how you want to lay out the chapters. And I think a update of all that existing land use that we had back in the 2017 plan. So do a lot of mapping and updating. And it's always nice when you get ready for that visioning session to have a bunch of maps on the wall. People can see, you know, the updates. Kind of miss the old build-out analysis that our staff did back in '03 that was on the walls for many years here. So that was our idea for this first phase. And, you know, I think it'd be great if we could think about a subcommittee, if that's the way you want it to go. And we'd be ready as a staff to jump into it as soon as the summer starts waning and everybody's not on vacation, and, you know, start working through that survey process, work with staff on the cheapest way to get, the most inexpensive way to get notices out. We used to have a mail out, mail back, do all that postage. Seems like postcards have been the way to go, or maybe tying in with some of the town's mailings. Try to find an inexpensive way to make sure that nobody misses it. You know, the articles in the Bow Times, everybody should be aware that there's a survey opportunity out there so we can get as much feedback.
Tax bill?
The tax bill is one way to go, you know, and that's, you know.
Well, I mean, people are paying attention to that.
Sure. And you know, we have QR codes now, so people want to do it on their phone. So, you know, a performance measure of 400 responses over that 250 is, you know, how we can start.
How long do you have the survey out there for?
You don't want to go too long, 4 weeks tops. There's certain times a year or two where people are paying attention more.
Yeah.
Second week of September into Halloween time is a good time that people aren't, you know, they've gotten back to school, but they're not getting into the holidays.
Yeah.
You know, so we kind of gauge that, and then it seems like every kind of public visioning session, bigger one we've ever done here in Bow has been in May.
Right. Including one with snow.
May 18th, I think, it snowed on us. So, you know, if you were ready to go, we had talked about, we could put together the draft contract that lays that out. This is that first phase, and we're matching it with some of our DOT funds. You'd see basically all of our staff, so our transportation planners helping with the transportation chapter, all of us, and a number of them were here for the 2017 plan, for the visioning sessions and working through the various outreach.
Let's not wait.
That's great. Yeah, so there
I
was.
mean,
good funding.
we're definitely getting a good, starting on this now is getting a pretty good start since we're.
I think a good start to get you there, so you've got that 10 years between plans. And, that's the goal, is to finish before that 10
The
years.
last one was a little delayed.
It took a while.
Yeah, so the idea is we do kind of a 3-year approach. It helps spread out the costs, spread out the work, and kind of that 2027 goal point of the 10 years.
So, we grab some of it for this year and then decide which one's next you want to do. You never know what other funding's out there that we can cobble together. Maybe less where we're going, but, we've had some housing funding that we've cobbled together with other master plans. Who knows what's out there the next time we're trying to budget and working together for phase 2.
So I guess I'd like to talk about how we would like to structure the committee. I think it would be great to get a few people from outside the planning board involved.
Yeah.
If we can recruit some folks.
How big a committee do you want?
What's
If you can get to 9, that's great, because, the 2 folks that aren't there that month and, one, that's maybe big, but it's also, you wanna have a lot of voices.
We talked about, obviously when we work on the natural resources chapter, we're gonna be working closely with the Conservation Commission. There might be people who are only interested in that one chapter, who might not sit on the committee, but that we would work closely with them on that specific chapter. And same with, heritage, there's a historic chapter too, so there's certain chapters that would bring in more people. We need a core of people to ride out the whole thing.
And maybe 9's aggressive, because I always know, there's a small volunteer pool. But I think, you could very well advertise for a couple of folks who aren't on a board, from the public to participate and be on that steering committee from the beginning to the end. A couple of folks from the planning board, maybe 3 reps from other committees, and we could talk about that, and, we could go and make the pitch about it. Again, stepping back, what is a master plan? I gotta,
Start from zero.
this is good stuff.
Is this an official committee like the telecommunications committee?
It's gonna be an official subcommittee of the planning board, yes, so.
Planning board, not us.
And so, yeah, a subcommittee of the planning board, not of the select board. I believe that's how it's usually structured.
I would do it that way, yes, and that's a pretty common way. So how about if we work together and maybe identify kind of some numbers, and I could show you some examples of how a couple of other towns have done it.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to know a rough idea of meeting frequency and so people would know what they're committing to. That's gonna be my question.
There is it's almost like you give them an idea, but then it's also how the interest on and energy on the committee side too is, and again, it's we pay attention to that because we don't want to run that committee into the ground. And so, but let me show you some examples.
Okay. So I would recommend you all start thinking about what your participation might look like, and also maybe take a peek through the 2017 plan. It's on the town website.
Absolutely.
I think I have a ton of paper copies in my office if anyone wants to take one home. I think that's a good place to start.
We would probably start with a survey and even just starting with the original questions, but I'd want to hear from the different boards and committees too. What is your 1 or 2 questions? And then the committee can kind of, you don't want to have too many, but you want to make sure that the questions that are important and the changes from 10 years ago are incorporated in the survey. So in the meantime, we can do the contractual stuff and come with a couple of examples, and perhaps I could come back next month and we could talk about kind of that organizational side.
Sounds good.
Nice,
Thank you.
Sounds great.
thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, let's get back to some old business.
Alright,
Old business.
old business, so the late edition here, there's a letter on Granite Engineering letterhead.
Enjoy.
Is it? This is related to the Amaskeg Beverages addition project that you approved their site plan in 2022. I think it was at my first meeting here. So I went, as a kind of a new thing, I've asked the building inspector to let me tag along when he does final inspections on commercial projects so that I can kind of bring the site plan with me and kind of see what that they did what the site plan says. So I got to go for a tour of Amaskeg this week and noticed that they were putting a dumpster. It's behind their loading dock, it's in the back of the building.
What?
A dumpster. A dumpster, a small dumpster. On the plan, they had noted that it was gonna have a chain link enclosure with privacy slats. They have decided they don't want to provide the enclosure because maintenance issues and it getting hit by trucks, and it's behind the building at the loading dock, so it's,
See,
You're saying
Definitely
as
not.
you're driving down Hall Street, it's on the other side of the building.
yes, it's
Okay.
toward the railroad tracks.
Okay.
Not visible at all, and it's a small dumpster. So I felt that this was a pretty minor change. It wouldn't require a waiver because it's already, you can't see it, like, it doesn't require screening. So I just asked them to provide you with this memo and show that they crossed off chain link enclosure with privacy slats. If you
They
want,
don't have a problem with that?
you could ask them to go through a more formal amendment process, but I thought we'd start here.
I don't.
Stamp it.
Yeah.
You wanna have a vote?
And
Do you need a motion?
Yeah, can you guys vote on that?
I'll make a motion to acknowledge, approve the removal of the requirement of the chain link enclosure with privacy slats in the small dumpster behind the Amaskeg Beverages property on 510 Hall Street.
I'll second.
all fair?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks. I think they'll appreciate that. I think we all will, let's keep things simple.
It took them a lot to get that done.
Yeah,
The whole,
Because it's the two town.
Yes.
the two-town thing, the fire, the
Multiple
getting
state
water for
permits.
fire,
They've been through
We
a
just
lot.
wanna be,
Precious,
we want to
it
be
was-
easier to work with in Concord.
yeah. Yeah, Concord tell them, yeah, we'll give you water, and then change
What
their
I
mind.
understand.
Yep,
They came back
did,
because
you're
of their
right.
curbs.
Yep, they had to change the curbs, yep. So that's great, thanks. And then some news, their governor signed House Bill 577 this week, which changes the law on accessory dwelling units. It requires that towns have to allow one ADU on any single family lot, either attached or detached with no conditional use permit or special exceptions. So basically, we will need to change our zoning that currently requires a conditional use permit for detached ADUs. In the meantime, obviously we can't change it right now, we have to wait till town meeting. In the meantime, we're gonna follow the law. And you won't see any more CUPs for detached ADUs.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then there's a few other components that we'll have to make sure we go through really closely when we work on the zoning amendment. But the one other piece of it is that we also have to allow an ADU in a non-conforming garage. Like if there's an existing garage or building that doesn't meet setbacks or exceeds lot coverage, we still have to let them put an ADU in it if it's existing. We can still require that at least one unit is owner occupied, so we can keep that if you want. The size, we're still compliant with the maximum size. Everything else
Yeah, I think everything occupied.
I think everything else we're in line
This
with, but
We'll start writing that warrant article.
and then whatever other ones, there'll probably be more with other RSA changes. But this is the one that came to our attention this week.
Alright,
That's it for old business?
Yeah.
I guess a minute.
I just have one small edit.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Line 116, where it says Miss Crystal noted that the property has an impervious cover less than 80%. I think it was that I asked about the percent of the impervious cover, and the response was that it was less than 80%.
Yep. Any others? I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of June 19th, 2025 as amended.
Second.
Abstain.
He'll ask.
Oh.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then you.
Do
And
we
I
have
will
an
abstain. 'Cause I was not here, thank you. I'm off my game today. Missed one meeting. Missed one meeting.
And did you have any business for us, Tom? You just had nothing better to do today, so you come in?
Well, no, the.
Master plan.
Oh, you wanna hear
plan
what the master
kickoff
plan?
is very important,
Okay,
so I wanted to.
that's,
hear
you want to hear that, huh?
Yes, please, yes, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Wow, 57 minutes, guys.